Hey, what's up, everyone? Morey Croson here, and today we're going to be talking about the perfect leg cycle to run fast, and we're going to start the video right now. This is the newest edition of the Performance Lab. Reach your individual goals. You don't want to just talk about straight line speed. We also want to talk about your ability to be quick. We break down your video. Let's make you into the quarterback I know you can become. This is going to just be super helpful, I think, for anybody looking to get faster, just because it's going to give a lot of detail, a lot of in-depth detail into really your entire gait when it comes to sprinting. And I guess before I do, real quick, if you like the information, click the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. I would love to actually hear your feedback too. I like to do the background with the athletes. I'd love to hear your feedback on is that helpful? And if not, what else would we potentially do to be able to help you guys better see or better understand some of these things that go into your sprinting mechanics? But we have two elite level sprinters. I always like looking at the back view the best, and with Christoph here, this is really the only back view that we can see, or that I've been able to see, of some of these elite guys. This is still during his drive phase, but we'll be able to still see the most important parts of his sprinting. Now, when we talk about the gait, what we are going to be really going into, and we could break it up into a bunch of different ways here, but we're going to try to keep it as simple as possible with just the understanding and some of the wording and vocabulary that I'm going to be using. But essentially, we have the ground strike, right? So when your or foot strike, so when your foot hits the ground. We have your transition is a way to put it, or another one would be like stance phase. Like, these are all words that are basically talking about when the time between when your foot strikes the ground and the time when your foot toes off. Okay, so your foot obviously hits the ground, and then it goes through a set of different interactions with the ground, which is your stance phase or transition phase to then toe off. And then we're going to have the swing phase, which is when I don't know why this isn't writing very well, but your swing phase, which is going to be when your foot is off the ground. Now, when we talk about the swing phase, we want to definitely put that into really a backside, which is when your foot is going to be behind, or I usually say it's like when your foot is off the ground and it's behind or even with the hip. Okay, once it passes the hip, the foot passes the hip. Now we're going to go into front side swing phase until the foot strikes the ground. Okay. So within the swing phase, we're going to have like more of a backside swing phase, and we're going to have a front side swing phase. Now, most of what we're going to be talking about within the leg cycle is going to be the times where the foot is striking the ground. I just think that understanding some of the keys within the foot strike will be very beneficial in being able to address many of the issues that we see when it comes to sprinting. Okay, I'm not going to go over a lot of the issues. We're going to really focus on what is the right way to do it. And I will really, I guess, challenge you or recommend, if you are looking to get faster, for you to be able to get similar video like this so you can see what it is that you're doing when you're sprinting and be able to help correct some of the issues that you have based off the information from this video. First, as we're striking the ground, what ends up being important is how your foot is situated. The best that your ability, what you want to be able to do is have what's called more of a neutral foot, or even a pronated foot. So if we were going to look at your foot, which would be a pronated foot, would be if the inside part of your foot, let's say my index finger here, is arch of your foot, or that bone on your ankle. If that bone is more inwards, that's going to be more pronated, right? Essentially, people that are flat-footed or you have no arch, right? If you're standing and you have both your shoes off, you usually have one foot that might have less space between your foot and the floor, right, or the ground. That's going to be the more pronated foot, okay? What would be supinated, which would be if that ankle was the other way, or you had a higher arch, that's going to be your more supinated foot. You might not necessarily be in supination if that arch is higher up, but you'd be in a more supinated position than the foot that has its arch closer to the ground. When you're striking the ground, you want to be in a pronated position within the foot. When you see both these guys in the position, they're in a neutral, pronated position, you can see that Noah Lyles slightly turns out with the foot. That's fine. We also would like to be able to see your toe be striking the ground first. So it's really good. You could see it here with Christoph. He's getting through with his foot, and you could see his toe is up. And then as he's striking the ground, you could see how he's pulling with his ankle. So his toe ends up hitting the ground first. This is why I love looking at the back view, because it's very clear to see. We'd be able to see it here with Noah Lyles. It's just a little harder when you're looking from this front view, but the leg cycle, I think, will be helpful being able to see the front view here. So that's why I have the Noah Lyles video. But we're going to be mostly looking at how Christoph's landing. We're going to be looking a little bit at Noah Lyles as well. What's happening here is as the foot's striking the ground, they're landing more on the front part of the foot and in more of that neutral position. Now that gives you the opportunity to absorb into more of the outside part of the foot. So notice how his leg is here as he's striking the ground, right? He's already even going into it slightly as the foot's striking the ground, but definitely as the foot strikes the ground. See how he turns out with his foot, and his knee and his hip, everything is basically turning out, and he's immediately getting his weight onto the front part of his foot, right? You could see that very little amount of weight is falling back, and really you could make an argument that he might be into a little bit more pronation than you would want to, or that ankle is a little bit more collapsed than you want to. But the point is he's landing, right? And the best we want to be able to do, we want to try not to get too much into pronation. We want to, best that we can, absorb by getting the knees and the hips to be able to come slightly outwards and really shifting the weight as fast as we can to the front part of the foot, okay? And both these guys, while, again, they go into a little bit of pronation, they do an excellent job of keeping their weight from going back into their heel. They land on the right part of the foot and then transition their weight forward, okay? So that's an important thing to be able to understand when it comes to what is considered your stance phase, right? We don't want to see a lot of, again, what's called pronation, where your foot ends up coming inwards, right? We're seeing it slightly with both of them. We'd want to be able to maintain more of a neutral to supinated position. And then as fast as we can, we want to be able to transition the weight forward to then be able to properly toe off. Okay, with Noah Lyles, because he's getting into a little bit more pronation here as he toes off, he is going to end up having to create a lot of what's called internal rotation within that foot or within that leg. So we can see how that heel is turned more in, and then immediately as that foot comes off the ground, that heel is moving outwards and that toe is pushing back. We want to see the toe pushing back. That would be considered plantar flexion, when your toe is facing back towards the camera here with Christoph, or away from the camera with Noah Lyles. So we want to be able to see the toe get behind the heel as that foot's coming off the ground. And as the foot's coming off the ground or at toe off, we'd also want to be able to see that heel facing as straight up as possible. We don't necessarily need to have full extension within the knee at this point, but we would definitely want to be close to full extension with the knee at this point. And then we also would like to see that foot behind the hip. A good percentage there would be about 120 degrees of hip extension as that foot's coming off the ground. Now, at this point, what we want to be able to see is a very fast knee bend within that leg. Okay, so you can see as that right, we're going to be focusing on the right foot for now here. Okay, this is all going to just be focused on right leg cycle. So both sides, it's going to be the right leg. I'm not going to talk about the left leg for this video. This is going to be backside. So we want to be able to see very fast knee bend. Okay, with Christoph, he's in a little bit more of what would be considered your acceleration drive phase. So he's not getting as high with his foot and backside as we see Noah Lyles is getting very high with that back leg. Okay, regardless, what we'd like to be able to see in this position is not only the knee bending, but also there being some degree of adduction happening, which means that the knee will be coming slightly inwards as the foot is coming forward. So see how the knee is here? It's a little bit wider. Okay, as the knee's coming through, he's going to end up bringing that knee slightly inwards. Okay, see how that happens there? Now, what this does, and really what we also want to be able to be seeing is so you can see the foot is a little bit more inside, The knees a little bit more outside. As he goes from backside to frontside mechanics, those are going to switch. So now we're going to get the knee to be a little bit more inside and the foot to be a little bit more outside. That would be the goal. Christoph doesn't do that as well, but that would be the goal, to be able to get more of the knee to come straight through and more of the toe to be able to come straight up. Noah Lyle does a really good job of being able to do that. It's one of his biggest strengths, is he's able to get that knee to come in and then toe to be able to come straight up very, very effectively. Now, as you are getting into the front side mechanics, so as we're transitioning here, an important thing to be able to consider is being able to maintain a high heel position. Okay, so when your heel comes up and is coming close to your butt, now your knee is really driving through. And as your knee's driving through, you want to be able to keep that heel up, again, towards your hamstring, the best that you can, so then you can get a very natural reach within your leg. What I see a lot of people do is they'll disconnect their heel as they're coming through, which then makes it so your foot is going to be striking straight down into the ground, creating more of like just a straight vertical force, or potentially even more of a braking force as it's striking the ground, as opposed to if we maintain that heel higher up and closer to the hamstring. Now, as we come through and start to extend with the knee, we'll get a very natural reaching action within our front foot and within our front toe. So the goal would be to be able to get as much height within that front toe as we can. Now, this is happening very rapidly with the legs. So you won't be able to have a ton of height within that front foot because everything is happening so fast. If you're able to get your foot too high, then the argument would be that you're probably not getting great extension within that back leg. You're probably not getting to that 120-degree point within your back hip or hip extension. The angle of that hip needs to be, 115, 120. Could be a little bit different depending on your height. Could be higher depending on your height, but I would say 115 should be pretty much expected. The closer to 120 would definitely lead to better results when it comes to running. If you're not getting to 120 and you're also getting a ton of height with your frontside mechanics, then you're definitely not utilizing your extension, which is really what is the fastest. The thing that's going to help you run the fastest is going to be the extension, the hamstrings, the calves, the glutes, even your low back. That's where most of our strength is from. That's why we could deadlift more than we could squat. Most people can deadlift more than they squat. Definitely amongst the fastest sprinters in the world, they can definitely deadlift more than they could squat. Now, as we're going through and getting this toe to get back up, we're preparing essentially for additional foot strike. So now when that foot comes back down and is striking back down towards the ground, we're wanting to get to those same type of positions. Right, so notice here, he's bringing the knee in. This is important to be able to differentiate between. So he's getting that toe to be able to come all the way up. And now as he's going and striking the ground, he's going to be pulling slightly out to the side. Right, so as the foot came forward, the knee came slightly in. The foot goes and all the way extends, kind of evening out the positioning within the leg, positioning within the hip. And then as the foot is going and pulling back, there's also some degree of what would be considered abduction, which means that the leg is going slightly away from the midline. So now we're landing with the foot right underneath the hip in as tall, straight position as possible and more towards the front part of the foot, right? More towards the ball of the foot. You could be more towards the outside of the foot, like we see here with Noah Lyles. You could be more towards the inside foot, like I think we'll see with Trayvon Bromell. He's a little bit more towards the outside. Regardless, we could see Bromell here on the left. It's a very good example of being able to absorb with so much of his weight forward and make it so he could very quickly transition right back off the ground. The biggest thing that is the separator between the fastest people in the world and just, I guess, the novice athletes, the guys that are not able to run as fast or maybe even plateauing within their speed, is how they strike the ground and how well they're able to properly stabilize their foot when they strike the ground and then be able to effectively transition off the ground. Okay, it all has to do with the foot strike. So, we talk a lot about ground force and how much force you're generating into the ground. Well, you're not going to be able to generate the same amount of force in the ground if you're not able to control it and stabilize it And you're also not going to be able to run fast if you're not able to toe off the ground in a way that's going to properly propel the body in the most efficient manner as possible. And what I mean by that is, as the foot's coming off the ground, we need you to be able to really push off of it in a very straight back way, really maximizing extension. If we're pushing off into any type of medial action or lateral action, that becomes a lot harder for the hamstrings to be able to control, because we are putting so much pressure on one particular part of the leg. If the foot's going more on the outside, that's going to put much more pressure on the outside part of the leg. If we're going more to the inside, we're obviously going to be putting more pressure towards the inside part of the leg. So we really need to be doing this in a way that's as straight back as possible. So now we can get the full activation of the entire hamstring to be able to then bring the leg right back through. And that's what all these guys do really well, is they're bending and getting a lot of straight action within that entire hamstring, which is really what helps maintain not only performance, but also health within the athlete. Okay, you could do it where you have slight internal or abduction, or the legs going more towards the midline or out, but it's really not a sustainable model. It's going to eventually probably break down, which is going to cause a decrease in performance. And so what we want to be able to see is, again, foot strike with more of the weight towards the front inside part of the foot. It could be on the outside. Really, the front part of the foot is what's most important. We also need to be seeing the ankle go into from dorsiflexion, which is with the toe being up, to plantar flexion as it's striking the ground. And we really want to be seeing the leg pulling back and out as that's happening. Now we're looking at no allows on the left side. When that foot hits, we need to be able to maintain as much weight forward as possible. We will want to see a slight amount of rotation within the hip and within the knee, and us kind of turning to absorb into that. We want to be able to feel the weight shift towards the outside part of the foot. What really the most effective way to be able to land would be to have your hips be able to kind of switch, where now that your weight is being shifted onto your right leg, you're going to get a little bit of a rise within your pelvis on your right side. And then as you go and push off, you're going to allow that hip to then slightly lower down. And then this hip is going to rise. And then as we get here, we're going to get into a more of a neutral position within the hip. And then as the foot goes and strikes, we're going to be landing in what would want to be as neutral as possible. And then slightly, as we land, be able to get an absorption through that hip. So now that left hip is going to end up being a little bit higher still as we absorb onto that leg. And then as we go back into extension, now we're going to see that left hip lower down and that right hip slightly raise up. And that's going to just kind of be how the pelvis moves as the foot is striking the ground. We don't necessarily need to be focusing too much on creating specific muscle activation within a particular muscle group when we're sprinting. We really want to be as coordinated as we can within the arms and within the legs. What I usually tell people when it comes to sprinting is really, as fast as you can, you want to be able to just get your toes all the way up and then be able to pull those legs through, or be able to pull your toe through and just be able to basically raise your toe up and then extend all the way back, and be able to do that as fast and efficiently as possible, and then be able to really get a good control or good understanding of what you should be doing within that leg cycle in order to really maximize the speed. That's a very in-depth, I think, analysis on the gait cycle and what should be happening within your sprinting when it comes to running fast. This is going to be more of a focus on your top speed when you're sprinting. Now, a wide variety of this type of stuff, or really most of it, is going to apply to more than just your top speed, but just take into consideration that what we're talking about here was really focused on top speed. There is different things that we're going to be seeing within your start, within your drive phase, in comparison to what we're going to be seeing within your top speed. It's not going to necessarily be hugely different, but there are certainly going to be differences. We also want to be considering here that everyone's going to be different within their anatomy. There's not one way to sprint. There's a million ways to sprint, right? And we want to be able to to find, and the goal of a video like this is to really create guidelines for you to be able to really understand that go into some of the most important parts within a biomechanic type of running efficiency, right? There are some things that we talked about that are going to be different with Christoph and Noah Lyles and how they went through with their leg swing, how their leg cycle was, and some differences that they had within their leg cycle, what they did within their feet and their toes as they strike the ground. I don't think any of those are necessarily wrong. I think that there's certainly some things that could potentially be more biomechanically efficient, but that is all just based off of what my knowledge is from I guess more from the scientific standpoint. Okay. This is not a practical application standpoint. What Noah Lyles is doing is he is running the fastest in the world. So it's very easy for me to sit here and say, oh yeah, he could do this, he could do that, he could do this. Well, if it's so easy, then why am I not doing it? And that's the argument, right? Is like, I don't think that I have all the answers when it comes to what is going to make you the fastest person in the world, or I would say that Noah Lyles probably has just as much information or potentially more information when it comes to how to be the fastest in the world, because he is the fastest in the world. So what I am going to be giving you here and what this leg cycle video is supposed to be giving you is really a baseline or a guideline to be able to assist you in better understanding what you need to be doing in order to be effective with your foot strike, with your leg cycle, and making it so you can really run as fast as possible. In order for you to be able to then implement this, you're going to obviously have to go through some trial and error and also be able to connect to your own body and understand your own body's strengths and weaknesses in order for you to be able to get to your own max potential speed. I don't want you to watch this and think that you need to run more like Noah Lyles or Trayvon Mermel or anybody for that matter. You need to be able to watch this and use this information, understand this information to then apply it to your body type and be able to really maximize your speed that way. So that's really the point of the video here. I really hope it helped out. I really hope that it created a lot of clarity when it comes to the leg cycle. Again, if you like the information, you click that thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. And that really helps us out a ton. The likes, the subscribes, even sharing it, right? If there's someone that you think will benefit from this, or if you learn from this and know somebody that could also learn from this, I would really appreciate a share. And if you want to have any conversations about some of the information that we went over, I always respond to comments. You could also send me an email. We do have a lot of things in the description down below in terms of programs, in terms of coaching. I do a lot of virtual coaching. I do a lot of breakdowns and create programs and things like that to help you in your journey to be able to run faster. And that's just what it is. It's a journey and something that I think over the years I've developed a lot of very specific knowledge and helpful knowledge when it comes to being able to pinpoint some of the main things that you can do within your sprinting that could really create a lot of improvement in a very short period of time. A lot of the stuff that we have are either monthly programs or things that are 4 weeks long, because you should be able to see improvement within a 4-week time period. If you make the right mechanical changes within your sprinting, you should be able to see change. Again, I hope you like the information. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you soon.